Recently, I've gone on a pretty big downswing, both live and online. So I've just picked some random hands out of my online database to check how I played there and if I did everything right. Not all of them are losing hands, some are actually good bluff catch scenarios that I had. So let's dive into it and have a deep look into how I played.
This is an interesting bluff catching hand here. Cutoff raises we call the big blind with pocket sevens. On jack 6-6, when he c-bet small, we have an easy call here. Now the queen comes on the turn. He elects not to bet this one, and on this river it's quite interesting. I could lead here, but I don't think I will get called by much worse. Like, I don't think an ace high would call me, so it's best to check here. And now he goes pretty big here, and this made me suspicious because I thought if he had a really good hand, then he would have probably bet the turn as well. If he had turned the queen, I don't think he would necessarily have checked behind. And the other thing is, like, if he has a queen or a jack, would he really go that big here on the river when the flush comes in? I just doubt that. So I think he is wrapping exactly a flush here, or some sort of a slow play, pocket queens, yes, but I just don't think this looks very convincing and very credible line here. So I flicked in the call, and he had the king 10 indeed, which I think was actually not great the way he played it, because on the turn, once he picks up that open-ender, he should just use the scare card and barrel big there. He would definitely have gotten me off a lot of hands, possibly even a jack, obviously not a 6, but like any other pocket pair, and also flush draws. Instead he chose to bluff the river, where I just caught him. Here's a hand where I suspect that I overplayed it, but let's see. So I raise pocket nines in the low jack, we get called by the cutoff, by the button, and by the big blind. We flop middle set, excellent. We go here, and I went pretty small. I think in hindsight I should have just made it bigger, not caring whether I have bluffs here or not. In this case, we get called only by the big blind. The 7 comes in on the turn. He checks. I now go pretty big. I would have gone bigger if it hadn't connected here. Not that I think he has a lot of jack 8 or 8-6, but it just makes it wetter, and I might not get called if I overbet here. I thought by something like a 10, weak 10 or so. That's why I went a bit smaller, and he calls again. And on this king river, I still have to go for value. Obviously the flush missed, and I can rep the king here, so I can still get called by a king if he had that, like the king of spades, king x of spades, or maybe he doesn't believe me with a 10, or he even has 2 pair or so. And then this happens. I actually overbet here, and he now jams, and I think in hindsight this is probably a fold, but I was thinking, well, he might have pocket 3s, pocket 7s, and maybe something like king 10, or maybe even a bluff with spades, although it's quite unlikely. So I just thought that he might be overvaluing his hand here, but then in hindsight I think that if he had had pocket 3s or pocket 7s, we would have heard from him earlier. That said, he's repping straight here, and wouldn't we have heard earlier if he had the token jack 8? Yes, he could have queen jack, but even then he might have led the river, but then it looks just so strong to check jam over my overbet, so I think it probably is a fold at these stakes. Instead I decided to call, and I got shown the queen jack off, so obviously I got very unlucky on the river, but I still think I should have found the fold button here.
Would you have folded in this spot? Let me know in the comments.
So this is a very interesting one. We open jacks in the low jack, and small blind 3-bets us to 10. We have a call here, no reason to really 4-bet, definitely not folding. Great flop for us, although very wet, but when he checks we have to bet here. I was thinking normally you'd bet big on this sort of a flop, however, because it was so wet and so connected, I chose to go for the small size here, which I'm not entirely sure if it is correct. I'll have to look that one up. So as you can see, pocket jacks on this board is mostly a bet. It is indeed a rather small c-bet. So when the board is that wet, don't c-bet big. I actually chose intuitively the right sizing here, although I could have gone even slightly smaller. Here villain calls and the turn is awful. Now we lose to a 10, and when he checks, I thought on this board, not that he necessarily has loads of 10s, but we are not likely to get a lot of value here, so I chose to just check. And we can see that I made a mistake here, so Solver loves to bet, and now Solver actually bets pretty big here. I guess it is because villain doesn't have a lot of 10s and because there are 2 flush draws out there now, but I would never have expected to bet 2/3 here on this wet board. I didn't necessarily make a mistake because check is in the mix here, but it's not the preferred solution. And when this river comes in, that's actually pretty awful for us. Now, we even lose to pocket 5s if he had that. We still lose to any 10, and we lose to the front door flush draw. So when he bets small now, I still think we have an easy call here. I definitely won't raise, but we have to be good 18% of the time. And it's not impossible that he has pocket 8s, pocket 9s, or 8-9 or something like that. Although I do think that he would have check raised a lot of those on the flop. So that's quite unfortunate, I should say. But still, I have to call, and we lose to pocket 10s, so it's ironic that I kept saying he doesn't have a lot of 10s, and he has 2 of them in the end. But I still think we actually lost the minimum here. If I had played like GTO suggested with a big c-bet on the turn, then we would have got raised here and I would have had to call with top set, so that would not have been great for us. And on the river, villain made it very cheap for us, which is quite welcome. In this hand, the low jack opens, we 3-bet ace queen suited in the hijack. He calls queen queen 9, great board for us, we're loving life. We c-bet big here as we would with our entire range that we c-bet with, so it's not a range bet, but if we decide to bet, we have to bet big on this one. And now we get min raised, which is a bit odd, but it could mean a lot. It could still be something like aces or kings, it could of course be a queen, it could be pocket 9s, but it could also be something more mergy like 10s, 8s or so if he doesn't believe us and he just wants to bet here to possibly get us to fold an ace king or something like that. So at this point, this is definitely a call. Here on the king turn, when he now bets about half pot, I'm not really loving it, and that is because his only bluff that he really had was jack 10 there. I mean, of course it's possible that he did it with king jack or king 10, but he probably wouldn't continue that big. So if he had jack 10, now we're behind, but we still have to call because the board might pair, so absolutely fine with my call here. And then on this brick river, he jams, and I tanked for a while and I came to the conclusion to call in game, but I think it is a mistake. Now of course I'm biased because I know that he had pocket 9s here, but it is a cooler on the one hand, but on the other hand, against this pool, I think you could arrive at a fold here, because we lose to pocket 9s, we lose to queen 9 if he ever has that, but we can discount that, and we lose to king queen, and we also lose to jack 10. So those are a lot of hands, obviously also to pocket kings if he played them this way. So what do we beat for value here? Well, maybe aces, ace king. I wouldn't rule it out, but I think he somehow would play those hands a bit more passively here. So I would discount a few combos of those, although we could still win against them. But we do need, how much equity do we need? 26% on the river. So yeah, it is close. If we do think that he would do that with aces and ace king, then yes. I thought in game maybe he has queen jack or queen 10, which is also obviously possible. So I do think it's close here. It's not a mistake to call, but against this pool it's probably slightly better to fold because it's not really a winning call. It's pretty much a break even or slightly losing call against someone as tight as him, like 18, 15. Plus, there aren't many natural bluffs here, unless he turns king 10 or so into a bluff, which I doubt. This type of player shouldn't do that, so I think this should have been a fold. Next hand we have a limp in the low jack. We make it 3.5 with ace king off, then small blind calls and the limper calls 10-5-5. This is a very close one. It's not exactly great for our range, but I thought we could either get called by a weaker ace, or if we get called by a 10 or a pocket pair, then at least we have 2 over. So I thought there's a good chance to just take it down here, but the small blind unfortunately called. Now turn is pretty good for us. It's an ace, and I went with a big bet here, 2/3, because I thought that if he has an ace, if he floated in with an ace, then we are good here, obviously, unless it's exactly ace 10. And I thought that if he had a 10, he might still call once here, so I'm pretty happy with the sizing as well. He calls again, and then on the 10 river, I think I have lost my value betting ability here. Yes, I might still get called by a weaker ace, which would be good, but I thought that, on the previous street I would extract some value from a 10, which now I can't do anymore, so I think this is an easy check behind, and we lose to 5-4 offsuit. So this guy called a 3.5 big blind bet pre-flop in the small blind with 5-4 offsuit, and then didn't even think about raising at all, neither on the flop nor on the turn with his trips. And then on the river, yeah, well, I didn't give him the chance, but he didn't lead out either. So a very poor way of playing a hand by the small blind, but he gets our money. Another bluff catcher here, so we open king 7 suited, low jack, slightly loose open, but I'm okay with it. We get called by the button and the flop comes 7-4-3. On this board here I check my entire range, so king 7, despite having a good top pair, is a check. Villain bets, and I could now either check call or check raise. In this case I just decided to check call because the board is quite scary and it could get worse. So if I get called here, I don't really know where I am on a lot of turns, so I thought it was better to just check call. The 9 of diamonds shouldn't really help villain, but it's definitely not great for my range. I never have a 9 here unless I have a set of 9, so, or maybe ace 9 of clubs would be the only possibility. But anyway, he now checks behind, and on this ace river, it's a bit annoying. I was thinking of possibly going for a block bet here on the river, but not with the ace, and especially not with the ace of the flush that comes in. So I check, and he now goes big, so it's very similar to the other hand that I just had, and this made me suspicious again, because yes, he could have a flush here on the river, but that's the only hand, because I don't think he would go that big with a normal ace here. With plus what kind of aces? Yeah, he could have ace jack, ace 10, something like that that he called pre-flop with on the button. But to me this just looked quite bluffy. It's not as clear as the other one, but we only have to be good 29% of the time here, and I just think because his range was not filtered at all, he just bet the flop with pretty much his entire range. Maybe he took a stab there, and I thought my 7 could be good here, so I called, and I was shown the pocket deuces, which is a very weird one on the river, but he might have thought that he could get me off something. It's actually not bad now that I'm thinking about it, because he doesn't have a lot of showdown value here, because what on earth would I have called the flop bet with? If it's not an ace or a flush draw, it must be some sort of a pair, and he loses against any pair. So unless I have something like 8-6, which I never have in the low jack. So yeah, no, it's actually a good bet here, but it still looked suspicious because he was wrapping exactly a flush, and I thought that it's not really likely that he has one, or no, let's put it differently. It's not that it's unlikely that he has one, but he has so many combinations of hands there because it's completely unfiltered that the flushes make up a small portion of his entire range, so when he bets big here, he just over bluffs, and this is why I called.
These were some of my recent online hands. If you want to see a few of my live hand analyses, then click on the video here.